Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Tuesday, October 7th, 2025, and you're listening to Alex's News. The high in Riverside today is 78.7 degrees, with a low dipping to 59.4, making for a mild fall day, perfect for outdoor activities without the summer heat. Coming up, we'll examine the motivations behind President Trump's push to federalize the National Guard in defiance of Democratic governors, and break down the Supreme Court challenge facing Colorado's prohibition on conversion therapy for minors. Plus, we'll cover other key developments from around the nation and the world. All this and more coming up on Alex's News. Stay tuned. Good morning, everyone. We're starting today's top story with a developing crisis in several major American cities. President Donald Trump's administration is pushing forward with federalizing and deploying National Guard troops, overriding objections from Democratic governors. This comes amid protests tied to immigration enforcement. Joining me now to break it all down is our Washington correspondent, Ethan. Ethan, fill us in on the big picture here.
Thanks, Grace. As of this morning, October 7th, 2025, the White House is justifying these moves as a response to what they call violent riots, lawlessness, and crime linked to protests and immigration crackdowns. According to reporting from PBS NewsHour via the Associated Press on October 6th, they've targeted at least 10 Democrat-led cities like Chicago, Portland, Los Angeles, Baltimore, Memphis, Washington, D.C., New Orleans, Oakland, and San Francisco. The administration is invoking 10 U.S.C. Section 12406, which allows federalization in cases of invasion, rebellion, or when states can't enforce federal laws, but without a formal proclamation under Section 254 calling for insurgents to disperse.
That's a lot of ground to cover, Ethan. It sounds like a real power play, almost like the federal government's guarding its turf against the states. What's the legal pushback looking like?
Absolutely, Grace. It's sparking a firestorm of lawsuits claiming overreach, violations of state sovereignty, and breaches of the Posse Comitatus Act from 1878, which limits military involvement in domestic law enforcement, plus the 10th Amendment protecting states' rights. Critics, including civil rights groups and Democratic governors, say it's an unprecedented politicization of the military, reminiscent of Eisenhower's 1957 deployment in Little Rock, but way more partisan and widespread. The Washington Post reported on October 6th that this breaks post-Civil War norms, potentially turning the Guard into a tool for militarized policing and hurting troop morale.
Let's zoom in on Chicago, where things seem especially heated. What happened there?
Chicago is ground zero, Grace. On October 4th, Trump ordered the federalization of 300 Illinois National Guard troops, ignoring Democratic Governor J.B. Pritzker's objections, and deployed about 400 Texas National Guard members for immigration enforcement near ICE facilities. This stems from protests at the Broadview ICE Detention Center, 12 miles west of the city, sparked by aggressive federal raids in Latino neighborhoods, including nighttime operations splitting families without due process. The White House, via spokesperson Abigail Jackson, claims it's to tackle ongoing violent riots unaddressed locally, with Trump himself demanding apocalyptic force against city crime, per PBS NewsHour on October 6th.
And the response from Illinois? Any court action?
Swift and fierce, Grace. On October 6th, Illinois and Chicago filed a federal lawsuit in the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Illinois, State of Illinois, and City of Chicago versus Trump and others, calling the deployment unlawful, a usurpation of state powers, and not meeting rebellion or invasion thresholds under that statute. Attorney General Kwame Raoul said in filings that Americans shouldn't face military occupation just because their leaders disagree with the president, citing Trump's long history of slamming Chicago since 2013, as reported by WTTW, Chicago's PBS affiliate, and CBS News on October 6th. Judge April Perry, a Biden appointee, held an initial hearing yesterday, denying an immediate temporary restraining order for the Texas troops, but ordering a response by midnight tomorrow, October 8th, with a full hearing in 2 days on October 9th.
What about the ACLU's involvement? And on the ground, is there really the chaos the administration describes?
A parallel suit from the ACLU of Illinois, joined by local news groups like the Illinois Press Association, Block Club Chicago, and Chicago Headline Club, accuses federal agents of a campaign of violence at Broadview, using tear gas, rubber bullets, pepper balls, and flash grenades that trample First Amendment rights for protesters and journalists. Their complaint notes never in modern times has the federal government undermined constitutional protections like this, with at least 7 federal charges from clashes. On October 3rd alone, there were 7 injuries and 13 arrests near the facility. But Broadview Mayor Katrina Thompson said on October 5th that while a very aggressive crowd closed 25th Avenue and tried blocking Interstate 290, requiring over 60 state troopers, there was no widespread damage or serious officer injuries per police logs and ACLU filings and OPB cross-referencing on October 6th. Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson issued an executive order yesterday barring federal agents from city property as staging areas due to racial profiling fears and masked Border Patrol ops.
Any standout incidents fueling this?
Yes, on October 4th, DHS agents shot a U.S. citizen woman armed with a semi-automatic weapon in southwest Chicago after her car and 9 others rammed and boxed in their vehicle. She allegedly tried to run them over, so they fired defensively. She's in fair condition. No serious officer hurts, per DHS spokesperson Tricia McLaughlin in PBS NewsHour and Fox 32 Chicago on October 5th. Superintendent Larry Snelling called the force reasonable if they felt ambushed, but it escalated accusations. Evidence from October 1st to 6th challenges the chaos claims police logs show just 6 arrests on October 4th. Tense but contained scenes, viral videos of unprovoked tear gas, no large-scale riots or damage, falling short of legal thresholds, as in the lawsuit, and echoed by Pritzker's no insurrection stance in CBS News and the Washington Post on October 6th. The administration even withheld $2.1 billion in Chicago infrastructure funds per AP on PBS NewsHour.
How about Portland? Any blocks there?
Portland's a judicial roadblock for Trump, Grace. His October 4th order aimed to federalize 200 Oregon National Guard troops after Governor Tina Kotek refused in late September, saying protests don't need military muscle. About 400 marched to a Portland ICE facility that day, leading to federal tear gas, pepper balls, and less lethal munitions. 6 arrests, per the Oregonian in PBS NewsHour on October 6th. DHS claimed over 100 rioters stormed it on October 1st, assaulting officers with 1 hospitalized, using strobe lights and blocking entrances. But local KGW saw fewer in nonviolent activities. U.S. District Judge Corinne Immergut, a Trump appointee, issued a temporary restraining order on October 4th, blocking the Oregon Guard, ruling small-scale protests don't justify it and harm state sovereignty. She expanded it on October 5th to bar out-of-state units, like from California and Texas, for 14 days, with a hearing October 17th. Her ruling said protests generally avoided violence against federal property or personnel and didn't disrupt functions much, cited in OPB on October 5th and The Guardian on October 6th.
And the Ninth Circuit?
They're reviewing the appeal alongside California's challenge. Portland police data shows 36 arrests since June protests started, 2 on October 5th for harassment and assault, none on October 3rd. FBI tallies 149 total, many uncharged. No organized rebellion, per chief statements in KGW on October 6th. Kotek and California's Gavin Newsom teamed up, with 101 California Guard briefly arriving before the block.
Wrapping up with Los Angeles and beyond, Ethan. What's the status?
In Los Angeles, Trump's June deployment of 4,000 California Guard and 700 Marines over Newsom's objections for raids and protests got a temporary restraining order from Judge Charles Breyer, saying it violated posse comitatus without rebellion. The Ninth Circuit stated in June, letting federal control continue while appeals drag on as of today, per LA Times on October 6th, and AG Rob Bonta's filings. Bonta slammed redeployments to Portland as inconsistent. Elsewhere, Republican Governor Jeff Landry requested Guard help in Louisiana cities like New Orleans for crime on September 30th, and in Memphis, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, AG Pam Bondi, and Stephen Miller launched a federal task force October 1st with Governor Bill Lee's backing, per PBS NewsHour. A September LA ruling found the administration willfully broke federal law, but appeals persist.
Finally, what are the bigger impacts?
Experts in the Washington Post on October 6th warn of wrecked guard readiness, disrupted training, family strains, and politicization tanking morale as troops handle domestic gigs unprepared. Cities face ramped-up tensions, resource drains, and a slippery slope on civil liberties. Trump has threatened invoking the Insurrection Act to sidestep courts if people are being killed, per Newsweek on October 6th. With Illinois hearings imminent and Oregon's block appealed, this risks deepening divides, no end in sight to federal-state clashes. It's like the guards being called to guard against guardrails on power.
Fascinating and concerning, Ethan. Thanks so much for that thorough rundown. Good morning, everyone. We're turning now to a landmark case at the Supreme Court that could reshape how states handle mental health practices for young people. Today marks the oral arguments in Chiles versus Salazar, challenging Colorado's ban on conversion therapy for minors. Joining me to break it all down is our Supreme Court correspondent, Chloe. Chloe, take us through what this hearing is all about.
Thanks, Grace. The Supreme Court heard arguments this morning in Washington, D.C., in this First Amendment showdown over Colorado's 2019 law banning licensed mental health pros from offering conversion therapy to kids under 18. It's docket number 24539, and as PBS NewsHour reported yesterday, it's pitting free speech rights, especially religious ones, against a state's power to curb what experts call harmful treatments. Conversion therapy, for those who might not know, refers to any practice trying to change a person's sexual orientation or gender identity, often rooted in the outdated idea that being gay, lesbian, or transgender is something to fix.
That sounds intense. Can you explain the specifics of Colorado's law and why it's sparking such controversy?
Absolutely. The ban comes from House Bill 19-1129, codified in Colorado Revised Statutes, Sections 12245224 and 12245202. It stops counselors, psychologists, and psychiatrists from things like trying to reduce same-sex attractions or suppress feelings toward the same sex in minors. Penalties are steep, up to $5,000 in fines per violation, or even losing your license, which could end a career. But it's not a total gag order, Grace. There are carve-outs for supportive counseling that helps kids explore their identities without pushing change, and it exempts unlicensed religious leaders like pastors, who handle most of these sessions anyway. According to CBS News reporting from yesterday, Colorado officials stress it only targets therapies with a set goal of altering someone, leaving room for faith-based talks on gender and sexuality.
And the science behind calling it harmful, what's that look like?
It's backed by major groups like the American Psychological Association and the American Psychiatric Association, who say conversion therapy, sometimes called sexual orientation change efforts or gender identity change efforts, doesn't work and causes real damage. Jurists explained yesterday that the APA reviewed 47 studies showing no solid evidence it changes anything, and it ramps up risks like depression, anxiety, and suicide attempts, especially in teens, where the rate can double. PBS NewsHour's segment last night highlighted how the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry calls it scientifically baseless and urges keeping it out of youth care. Globally, 28 countries ban it, from Canada to Spain, and the United Nations compares it to torture.
Who is the plaintiff here, and what's her side of the story?
The lead plaintiff is Kaylee Chiles, a licensed Christian counselor in Colorado Springs with 10 years helping families and teens. As PBS NewsHour's Stephanie Tsai detailed yesterday, Chiles sued in 2019, updated in 2022, against state officials like Patty Salazar, represented by the Alliance Defending Freedom. She calls her work faith-informed talk therapy that helps clients who seek it voluntarily align their feelings with Christian beliefs like reducing unwanted same-sex attractions without force. But the law has her turning away minors to avoid penalties, she says, creating a chilling effect on private sessions tackling issues like anxiety or depression. A story from CBS News yesterday shared how a mom, Erin Lee, struggled to find counselors for her daughter Chloe, now 16, who questioned her gender but later desisted. Therapists shied away from deep talks due to ban fears.
The state must have strong defenses. What are they arguing?
Colorado, led by Attorney General Philip Weiser, sees this as regulating professional conduct in a trusted role, not censoring speech, so it only needs to pass a basic rational basis test for protecting kids. They point to the same expert consensus on harms, and note the law's narrow focus, allowing exploratory therapy. JURIST's explainer yesterday noted exemptions for gender transition help and neutral support. Supporters like psychologist Julia Sadusky, a Catholic expert in Denver, back it via amicus briefs, saying ethical therapy sticks to evidence, not impossible changes. And testimonies are heartbreaking, Grace. PBS NewsHour shared Joyce Calvo's story of her daughter, Alana Chen, a Catholic teen who went through nearly a decade of secret conversion therapy after a priest called her attractions a mortal sin. It led to self-harm, hospitalizations, and her suicide in 2019 at age 24, just before the ban kicked in.
Procedurally, how did we get here, and what might the justices focus on?
It started with a federal district court denying an injunction in 2019, upheld by the 10th Circuit last year as valid conduct regulation. But appeals courts are split, like the 11th striking Florida's ban while others upheld similar ones in New Jersey and Washington. The Supreme Court took it up after declining a Washington case in 2023. Previews from SCOTUS blog and CBS News suggest today's arguments zeroed in on whether therapy is regulatable medical practice or pure expression. Chile's pushes for strict scrutiny, citing cases like NIFLA versus Becerra in 2018 and 303 Creative versus Elenis in 2023, protecting religious speech. Colorado counters with United States versus Skrmetti from this year, upholding a Tennessee gender care ban. Justices might grill on harm evidence, the law's tailoring with exemptions, and scrutiny levels. Conservatives like Thomas and Alito could favor Chile's on religious grounds, per Masterpiece Cake Shop in 2018, while liberals prioritize youth safety. No enforcement actions in Colorado since 2019, as state records show via Jurist and CBS News, bolsters their "it's not censoring" stance, though challengers call it preemptive censorship.
Bigger picture, Chloe. What could this mean?
A win for Chile's might topple bans in 23 states and D.C., boosting professional speech protections and allowing more faith-based options, as Jurist warns, potentially spilling into talks on birth control or worse. Upholding it solidifies state health powers amid LGBTQ+ rights battles, tying into this term's transgender athletes and voting cases. PBS NewsHour cautions overturning could revive tragedies like Alana Chen's, decision likely by summer 2026. It's a conversion of sorts for free speech doctrine, Grace, changing how we view therapeutic talk.
Powerful stuff, Chloe. Thanks for that thorough rundown.
My pleasure, Grace.
Here are some other headlines. On the 2-year anniversary of the October 7th attacks, Israel held memorials while the war in Gaza ground on, and negotiators gathered in Egypt for indirect ceasefire talks. Unofficial commemorations and moments of silence, including at the Nova Music Festival site, honored the roughly 200 people killed in the 2023 Hamas-led assault. Inside Gaza, where health officials in the Strip say the Palestinian death toll has surpassed 67,000, Israeli airstrikes and artillery fire continued. The anniversary coincides with a major diplomatic push. Hamas and Israeli delegations in Cairo are weighing a U.S. proposed plan to free the remaining hostages in exchange for Palestinian prisoners and, ultimately, to end the conflict. The United Nations says nearly 90% of Gaza's population has been displaced amid famine conditions and vast destruction, turning ceasefire talk into a literal matter of life and bread. Mounting public dissatisfaction in Israel over the government's wartime stewardship, coupled with international calls to stop the bloodshed, piles pressure on both sides to strike a deal. before this window of opportunity shuts and the shutters come down again. On Capitol Hill, Attorney General Pam Bondi is slated to testify today before the Senate Judiciary Committee, her first congressional oversight hearing since confirmation, a legal matinee with high political stakes. The session will probe allegations that the Justice Department is being weaponized to target President Donald Trump's political adversaries. Democrats are expected to grill Bondi over her 8-month tenure, including investigations into Trump critics and the recent indictment of former FBI Director James Comey on charges he lied to Congress. Republicans, meanwhile, plan to hail her efforts to tackle violent crime and unwind Biden-era policies, law and order with a side of policy reorder. The appearance puts Bondi's leadership under a microscope and the department's independence on the scales, with potential ripple effects for sensitive probes involving figures such as Comey, Senator Adam Schiff, and New York Attorney General Letitia James. For lawmakers, legal experts, and the public, today's hearing is a compass check on whether Lady Justice is still blind or being led. In Seattle, a hotel bill that checked in has yet to check out. An investigation by ProPublica and KUOW finds the city signed a $2.7 million lease extension in early 2024 to keep rooms at the Civic Hotel and other buildings for unhoused residents. Then paused placements, leaving dozens of rooms vacant for nearly a year, while rent kept running. By December 2024, taxpayers were footing roughly $4.200 a month for each empty room, even as thousands of people lived without shelter. Officials in Mayor Bruce Harrell's administration called it a temporary timeout to grapple with a budget deficit and hunt for a cheaper, longer-term site, citing the sunset of one-time federal funds. But reporters note the city rejected a more affordable option that might have kept the program alive without interruption. The result: millions spent on unused space in the middle of a declared homelessness emergency, a policy pause that became an expensive staycation. Taxpayers want receipts, fast. That's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King with Claude Sonnet 4.0, Gemini Pro 2.5, Gemini Flash 2.5, and Google Cloud Text-to-Speech. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.